One of the most important things that Christians need to do and to know is to believe in the resurrection, that Jesus did indeed rise from the dead. This was not just a spiritual experience, but this is the de facto experience of a human being, one of us with a human body, who died, horrific death, and was raised up and appeared to the disciples and to many others. How do we understand what has happened, and where are the proofs that this has taken place? Ladies and gentlemen, we do need proof. No matter who we are, we do need proof, especially if somebody tells us a fantastic story. We want to understand, how did this happen, and is it real, or is somebody just exercising their wild imagination? What do we have in the scriptures that attest to this fantastic event of the resurrection of Jesus? There are three things that I think we have to pay attention to, and then I'll talk about some examples. The first thing is this, is that we have a really simple gospel story. It's not very complex at all. What do I mean by that? Jesus revealed himself in a very simple way. He went to his friends and he showed himself to them, Mary of Magdala, the apostles. It was a very simple experience. In other words, there was really no pizzazz to the whole thing. I think if I were to stage this, I would have done it in a more elaborate way. Perhaps I would have had it Radio City Musical. Some things I can't resist, I'm sorry. Secondly, I think I would have waited, until we had better ways of communication, television, Twitter, not Instagram or TikTok. I wouldn't use that. But we can't say Twitter anymore either. X, formerly known as Twitter. I would have waited, until I had a broader audience, and then the satellites could have picked this up, and it would have gone worldwide. But Jesus didn't wait for CNN. I'm sorry, Fox. He didn't wait for it. He did this in a very, very simple way. And that's one of the proofs that we have that it's true. Because, God is not out there, to razzle-dazzle us with the media and with high tech and with special places. He reveals himself to the apostles in a very, very simple way. And then it is their testimony. It's their testimony that we believe in. It's been passed on for 2,000 years. 2,000 years. And you're proof of it. You wouldn't be here if it weren't true. If it were false, believe me, after 2,000 years, we would have found out, wouldn't we? Okay. We have multiple attestations. All the Gospels agree that this has happened. But also we find some things in here that you would not normally find in a testimony. In other words, if we went to court and we were taking testimony from some witnesses, you would just, how many in here remember Dragnet? We're an older congregation here. Just the facts, man, just the facts. You don't need all the folderol in there to impress people. This gospel today is so interesting because not only is it simple that Jesus appeared, but also it's so human. It is so human. And you know who's the most human of them all in this gospel? John, the beloved disciple. How is this very human? It's very human because John Well, he's always bragging about himself. He keeps calling himself, I'm the beloved disciple. What's he saying? I'm Jesus' favorite. That's what he's saying. And he makes it into the gospel, and makes sure he tells us over and over and over again that Jesus loved him best. And at the Last Supper, who's sitting next to Jesus? John. And he leaned his head against the breast of Jesus. Hey, boss, who's the cheat? Who's the rat? Who's the guy that's going to betray you? I think he had that confidence in Jesus, just like a little kid. Sometimes young people, they don't have all the sophistication that older people have. When to say something, when not to say something, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. He just puts it out right there. Right next to the boss. I asked him. Right? Fantastic, very simple. But this gospel scene is so fantastic because it's so real. Let me tell you this. John is the last of the disciples to die. He's in his 90s, I think, when he died. Every other disciple died martyrdom earlier. But John lasts a long time. And John tells a story about Mary Magdalene, the women coming back and saying, the tomb is empty, they stole the Lord, what's going on? I saw the risen Lord. And then the disciples are saying, yeah, right, lady, you gotta be kidding. We saw him, crucified, he's dead, and we don't believe that you saw the risen Lord. So they said, well, the tomb is empty. Come on and see. And they go out there, and Peter and John. Now, Peter's probably one of the older ones of the group, yes? Probably one of the old ones of the group, maybe 35, maybe 40. And John is the youngest of the group. So John must be 16 or 17 years old. Right? So they go running, and then John says, and this is so human. John says, but I got there first. I mean, what do you expect? I mean, you have a high school kid, and they're running, they track me. I mean, they take off like rabbits. And Easter bunnies. And then he says, not that I get there first, which is logical. If you're like 16, you could beat some old guy, 35 or 40 years old. I never thought it would call an old guy 35 or 40 years old, but I guess for that time period, I guess that was pretty old. And he says, but I didn't go in. Now, why didn't he go in? Anyway, you get scripture scholars, they'll say, these guys out there, they're very, very technical and very, very deep thinkers. Well, he didn't go in because he wanted to show respect for Peter. And some say, well, he didn't go in because he wanted us to realize that Peter is the head of the church. So he didn't go in, and he waited till Peter got there. Do you know why he didn't go in? He was scared. Come on, let me tell you something. If you hang out with enough kids, teenage boys especially, these guys, honestly, they're such braggers. They brag about everything. They're not afraid of anything, Then you ask some of them, suppose it's the early hours of the morning, it's still dark out. And, there's still fog coming up from the ground. Would you walk through a cemetery? Well, no, I wouldn't do that, That's what happened. John was scared. And he waited till Peter got there. And then Peter goes in first, and he sees the empty tomb. He sees the empty tomb, and John says something else. John is fantastic. He's hooked on himself. He says, and the disciple believed. And he's trying to put himself there as the first believer because the tomb was empty. Now, is our faith based on empty tomb? No. You've heard of Jimmy Hoffa, haven't you? Anything could have happened. There's even a story planted that the guards were paid off. They were paid off, and that way there would be an excuse and say the apostles came and stole the body and the guards weren't there. So those stories went around and around, and they were planted in the Gospels themselves. That's why you know these Gospels are real. Okay? Now, what we see here then is an image of ourselves that, like John, like Peter, sometimes it's not easy to believe in the resurrection. We might have run out to that tomb. We might have been frightened to go into the cemetery. But we're here because of faith. We're here because of our faith. We were not witnesses to these events, but we believe them to be true because of the testimony that we have in the Gospels. So our faith is not based on an empty tomb. Our faith is based on what? The testimony of the apostles. And that testimony is passed on to us in every generation, as I said earlier, for the last 2,000 plus years. And you are part of that testimony because you are here today. If it were not true, you wouldn't be here. So you're part of the gospel story. Let me just tell you a couple of little stories to show you how real, not just real, but what it means, resurrection. How do you get this sense of it? You hear the testimony, but sometimes it's hard for us to comprehend it. How do we understand it? I'll tell you a story. When I was a little boy, we had an old German woman who lived upstairs from us. Some of you might remember the converted one families into two families. Okay. And Grandma Krause lived upstairs. And she would tell the story many times. And I remember as a boy listening to this story. And only as I got older did I appreciate really what happened, what it was all about. She lived in Germany as a little girl. Her parents had a number of children. She was the last on the line, and she had a brother that was 20 years older than she was. During this time period, Hitler took over Germany. The Nazis were wreaking havoc on the country. And the Nazis were not only persecuting the Jews, but gypsies, homosexuals, and priests. And one other group, university professors. Because anybody that was intelligent and could speak the truth was a hindrance to Hitler's plans for taking over Germany and the extermination of these undesirable groups. My brother was a professor at the University of Berlin. Remember that place where they began burning books? Some of you may have visited and saw the display in the ground of books half burned under glass as you walked the pavement. And they arrested him. My brother, Professor John Stock. The family really had no other contact with him after that. They knew he was arrested. They didn't know where he was. They didn't even know if he was alive. They presumed he was dead. And that was a good presumption, trying to live through a concentration camp. After the Allies invaded Germany, and the concentration camps were open and the prisoners set free, she said she must have been a girl, maybe around 10 years old by now. And she said she was sitting in front of a house. She saw a man walking down the street. He looked familiar, but she really couldn't tell who it was. He was a skeleton, a walking skeleton. And he yelled out, "Leopoldina! Leopoldina!" And it was her brother Johnny. That was the resurrection for her. She saw somebody who she thought was dead, but he was alive. That's the resurrection. One more story. My father died in 1997, a long time ago. The Easter after my father passed away, one of my brothers, who is not known to be very emotive or sentimental, we were having Easter dinner, first time without him. My brother said, I just wish I could dream about him. Just if I could just dream about him. I said, Peter, you don't have to dream. You'll see him again at the resurrection on the last day. That's our faith. Death is ugly. Ugly. When they tell me, oh, it's so beautiful. No, it's not. I've been there with people. I've been at the hospital. I've seen them in their homes wasting away, sick and in pain, families broken by what's happened to them. I couldn't live without believing in the resurrection. Because God does not waste anything. He doesn't even waste death. Almighty God created us to live with him forever. And so this day is not just about Jesus, it's about each and every one of us here that has hope and will share in a like resurrection. God loves you.